Web on web, bro.
Whoa.
Web on web.
Web on web.
Gets real.
That's how you know.
That's the thing. That's the
web
thing.
on web.
It's a real thing.
Yeah.
It's like a real American
if someone
handshake.
shakes my hand
web on
and
web.
they're like,
yeah, I
because
get a little offended.
That used to be me when I was walking the streets of Old Town.
Oh, that's a different type of handshake.
To you.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, here we go.
Memories. All right.
Game time.
All right, everybody.
Welcome back to Empower El Mundo. This is Dorina.
And Deanna with Bledsoe Empower.
Yes.
We are your mental toughness coaches.
Yes, and executive coaches. We are so excited that you guys are tuning in with us today. Earlier, we went live on Instagram at 6:30. We go live every Wednesday at 6:30, so please make sure that you tune in. We went live talking about depression and ways to manage it, how it manifests, whether it's biological, environmental, or genetic, right, in our hereditary. And we had a special guest who is actually going to be on our podcast here in a bit.
Yes, so those of you who are listening, you can't see, but we will upload this video to YouTube so that you can also experience the visual of this podcast. Yes. Today, our topic is depression and entrepreneurship. So we have a really amazing guest today, and we are going to introduce him in just one moment. You'll be able to hear his voice. His name is Brandon Williams. Yes. He will be on here to share his experience and his testimony with going into entrepreneurship and how depression seeped in and tried to really take away any sort of joy and happiness that he was experiencing with going down that entrepreneurship journey.
Yes, and we're so excited to do this. Empower El Mundo, we created this platform, Deanna and I, in order to empower the world. Empower El Mundo literally translates to empower the world. Mental health affects everybody. It does not discriminate. And what we want to do to bash the stigma and get rid of it is spreading awareness by having people share their own testimony. Deanna and I are both trained mental health counselors, so definitely take our word. We're saving you a couple bucks from having to go to a counselor. It tends to get a little expensive, right?
Very, very true. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe to our podcast. You can find it on any streaming platforms. Apple, Spotify tend to be the most common ones that individuals use. Search Empower El Mundo. Hit subscribe, rate us, let us know your experience,
yes.
Especially if you relate to anything that we talk about, or if you have a difference of opinion. We want to hear your perspective.
Absolutely. So let's get into it. Depression,
yes.
right? Depresión. What is it?
I think that depression, you can tell that you are experiencing those symptoms when your day-to-day activities are looking different and they're becoming more difficult to actually accomplish and complete those.
Absolutely.
So are you less interested in what you typically do? Are you less interested in going to school if you're in school? Are you less interested in going to be around your friends or your family?
Yes.
Are you no longer really interested in going to work? Right?
Just sad.
Just sad.
Just sad.
It's an overwhelming emotion of sadness.
Yes.
And maybe even loneliness.
Or disappointment.
Hopelessness.
Right. Helplessness. It's a lot of different things. Yes, right. Checking it all off the list. And the one thing that is really important that we all need to know about depression is that it's one of the most leading causes of disability in America. Okay. That's pretty immense. Right. Yeah. We're talking about a large number of individuals, not a medical condition, right? We're talking about a mental health condition that's disabling people enough to the point where they are not able to function in their relationships or at work or even take care of themselves, right? Some of them actually need caregivers. That's how disabling depression can get. And so definitely stay tuned. We're going to talk about the difference between major depression and clinical depression because they are very, very different and they look very, very destructive.
Yeah. And let's just take a moment because I think that sometimes when people hear the word depression, they are much easier to say like, oh, that's not me. Right. Or they're like, oh, that's got to be like that person over there. When the reality of it is depression is it's definitely within the top 5 disorders that individuals experience within the US.
Yes.
If not within the entire world.
Yes.
So, and depression can look like major depression disorder or clinical depression, or if it's a little bit lighter, we can experience it as a mild level of depression, right? And so that's what we're going to dive in a little bit deeper and talk about what that looks like. And I think that with this episode, it's really a good opportunity for you to take a moment, put the mirror up to yourself and see where you're at emotionally, mentally, and then also physically, because depression absolutely affects our physical experience, because we can experience backaches, we can experience shoulder pain, anything like that. So I think it's really important for you to, as you're hearing this, find out what you can identify with, or maybe what you don't identify with, or who around you looks like this, or they look like they're experiencing these type of symptoms. Well,
1 in 5 adults actually do suffer from some form of mental health conditions. So if you think about that, 1 in 5 is really, that's a lot of people. Think about 5 people in your own family, right? That's one person that could be suffering in silence, suffering from depression, suffering from anxiety, suffering from substance abuse or any other type of addiction, right? It does not discriminate. So major depressive disorder tends to look like mild symptoms of depression. It can also look like severe symptoms of depression. So that can include hopelessness, helplessness, feeling worthless, feeling disconnected from others and relationships, having relationship issues. Can also look like starting to use substances to replace emptiness, right? We can also get into some unhealthy or toxic relationships. We can start having problems in our occupation. We are engaging in poor hygiene, which means that we stop doing things like brushing our teeth, changing our clothes, washing our, taking showers, feeding ourselves, right? So, and we can also have sleep disturbances. So most individuals I've worked with who have major depressive disorder tend to have insomnia, right? They're not getting enough sleep. And there's some individuals who have hypersomnia. They sleep for 10 to 12 plus hours.
And can't get enough of it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so major depressive disorder tends to be diagnosed or identified as something that can become debilitating when we're seeing somebody struggle for 30 days. Right? It takes 30 days. And then when we start seeing 6 months of somebody really being in an episode of depression, then we start having some concerns and we start really, really pushing treatment. Right?
And something, if you're an individual who you're like, okay, this makes sense, but you need to have more of the visual. I was watching this show recently. It's called Euphoria. Are you guys familiar with it? So it's a new show. It's the star is Zendaya, and essentially what it is, it's a story of an individual who's going through addiction, and she's like still in high school, but she's going through addiction. She gets into a sober place, but then once she gets sober, those feelings come back. So you get the visual of what major depressive disorder looks like, to the point to where she did not want to get out of bed for so long just to go to the restroom that she ended up experiencing medical disorders, right? Or medical conditions, I should say. So having like a UTI, yeast infections, that is the reality of what it looks like. So even if it's 10 steps away, it can be that difficult to even take step 1.
Yeah, it really can. It really can. I want to give another visual because I love your example. I love talking about Winnie the Pooh, right? So let's think about all the characters in Winnie the Pooh. Who is the one character that represents depression?
We all know, Eeyore.
Eeyore.
We all know it.
Right? Eeyore. And everybody would talk about it, right? Oh, here comes Eeyore, right? Eeyore would come with this negative funk, and you would feel it, right? He literally would take all of that sense of positivity and optimism out of that space, right? And that's what depression feels like for some of us. It feels like a dark cloud that is consuming all of our positivity, and that, if anything, we get lost in it, right? We get lost in that darkness, and we sometimes forget that the light is still right ahead of us, right? Yes. So with that being said, I think this is a good point to talk about depression and allowing Brandon Williams to share his story. Yay. Yes.
Cute class.
Greetings. No, that was pretty deep. Just to kick it off, I'm just sitting here listening to you guys and just learning so much, going through it from my own perspective, but then, hearing what you guys have to say about it is pretty amazing, and puts everything in perspective. So, I'm just excited to be here with you guys.
We're glad you made it.
Yes.
I'm super excited about, the conversation that you guys are creating, especially amongst our generation where, maybe it's a little bit taboo to kind of come out and speak about it, and there's a lot of us that deny that we're going through these things and they never get addressed. So the fact that you guys are sparking the conversation and creating a safe place for people to tune in and, really participate in it as well is a major bonus. So, hats off to you guys for sure.
Thank you. We're glad that you chose to be here, and just spend some time and really spend some time talking about this. Because I think you're right. I think that a lot of the time when people hear the word depression or anxiety or mental disorders, it's like taboo. Like nobody really wants to have that conversation.
No, not me. No, not me. It's not me.
It's
not me. It's that person over there. When it literally, if it's not you, it could be the person next to you, or the person to the other side, or the person next to you.
It could be your partner. It
could be your
spouse.
partner.
It can be your parents, right? It can be your best friend. It can be you. And it probably is.
Yeah. So, okay.
Anywho.
Now that we're here, let's know who Brandon Williams is. For those who didn't get an opportunity to catch us on our Instagram Live, we did give you little nuggets of what this conversation was going to look like. Yes. So if you get an opportunity, definitely go and watch that. But Brandon Williams, who are you? What do the people need to know about you?
Yes.
In a nutshell, me, I'm just a West Side kid from Arizona here. We had a conversation earlier about, where you from and where you hit puberty, and, originally from Southern California, but grew up here in Arizona. I still feel that little bit of hybrid, in my personality and who I am, my character, but still a West Side kid and, former student athlete, played collegiate football, started here at GCC, and then got a chance to play at Colorado State. So that was an ultimate experience. And that's, just being a student athlete, that was kind of my identity for so long, and then without sports, it's like,
who am I?
Who am I now? But I was blessed enough to have an opportunity, and actually, my first break at entrepreneurship, my wife and I, my girlfriend at the time, while we were in college in a small little town in Colorado, there was no such thing as a club. So we took an opportunity to start hosting different events, Thumbs Up Entertainment. And I mean, it spawned. It was crazy. Like people were traveling from major colleges to come to our events.
That's huge. That's cool.
Yeah.
And in Colorado?
Yeah. In Colorado, yeah. It's a distance, So people were driving to come to our parties.
You created a little community out there.
It happened, but that was just kind of the, who I was up to that point, and then still like, okay, what now? So I was blessed that the success allowed me to actually go study abroad. In Europe. I studied in Germany for a little while.
Ooh, did you pick up on the language? Because that is definitely...
Ich spreche kleine Deutsch.
Ooh, what is it? I need the subtitles.
Yep, I speak a little bit of German. It's nothing cool enough to hold on to. So
listen,
I kind of left
pretty
it.
Cool.
Yeah.
What is hello? My name is.
Hallo, ich name Brandon.
Hallo, ich name Diana.
Hallo, ich name Darina.
Yeah, it's a little light Spanish.
It's
hola.
Wow.
Hola, me llamo Diana.
Well, actually, German is kind of like the root of English. Like, there's so many words that we use. Like, kindergarten is a German word. Kindergarten, yeah.
So I shouldn't.
You said it real hard.
Yeah, so a lot of those. But yeah, so not knowing who I was, after losing my identity as a student athlete, got the chance to go study abroad and travel through Europe. And then while I was there, that's when I really developed passion for travel and hospitality. So when I came back here stateside, back to the West Valley is when I actually entered into the hospitality industry, and that's what I do now by day. So I do sales and marketing with some of the top 4 diamond resorts here in Arizona. So that's like my identity by day. And then by night, what we're here to talk about is the entrepreneurial journey and the influences that has had on my life and who I am now and who I'm becoming and strive to be, and all the hurdles that's involved with that as well. So.
Right. So how long have you been your own businessman?
So in spurts, as I mentioned, being in Colorado, that was kind of a first phase of it all. First coming back here, partnering up with different friends, creating the same kind of promotional business in the entertainment nightlife. That was kind of a phase. But as of recent, the last 3 years, I've been on an independent journey, and figuring out, which lane do I want to play in, which game am I going to learn. So it's been going on 3 years strong of, actually making headway into, creating time and financial freedom.
Right.
I think I kind of want to go back a little bit, because I think that's something that you said resonated with Doreen and I as like former athletes. And also I think that a lot of the individuals who listen to our podcast and our audience either played a sport or they can relate to having some sort of extracurricular activity. I don't know why it's so difficult for me to speak at this moment. Thank you for your patience. But I think that everyone can identify with that, like with growing up and doing something for such a long time that we identified with that. And then as soon as it stops, we're like,
abruptly.
Whoa.
It stops abruptly. Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
It
does. It's like you're cut off the team.
Yeah. I just lost my friends. I just lost my hobby. I just lost, everything that I do day to day, my schedule, everything has changed, after that last game immediately.
Yeah. And I think, like, for instance, if you're a student, like when you're in school, like while you're enrolled in your program for X amount of time, you're like, oh, I don't want to do homework, or I love homework, whatever the case is, but you do it for X amount of time and then you hit the summer and you're like, what am I supposed to do with this time? Right? You're like, I have so much free time. So then you just kind of sit there and you're like, I kind of miss it.
Right.
But the thing is with school, like you can go back at any time. Right. But with sports, because there's a physical component, like it's a different level of like, it's over.
Right.
Like you're done. Like go play in the league. You know what I mean? Go play in like the above 20 league, the above 30 league, the above 50 league, whatever that looks like. But I think that it's really important for people to understand, like when you identify with something for a long extended amount of time and then it stops, that alone can be a moment where some sort of mental disorder or mental symptoms can creep into your world.
Absolutely. Big time. Identity crises are real.
Oh,
they're real.
Super real. Yeah, for sure.
And we're talking about this identity crises are actually really normal. They're supposed to happen as you age, right? So if you think about hitting puberty, right? Puberty is where you're from. Okay, that's one rule. But the other thing about puberty too is trying to figure out who you are, who are your friends, who you are with those people, right? So Brandon and I went to high school. We went to high school together.
Let's hear it.
Right? So we're the athletes. We're the athletes, right?
Brandon, what was Doreen like in high school? Because I need to know.
Graphic tees.
I mean,
Chuck
honestly,
Taylors. What's up?
I feel like you've been like so consistent in who you are, like from that age. Like you still have like all the energy about yourself. You know what I'm saying, the humility about yourself. So you're not any taller, but
fair enough.
Listen, a strong 5'4".
She's
a strong
5'5".
Well,
with respect.
Okay, with heels is what you meant to say.
Strong 5'5".
Drina, what was Brandon like in high school?
Always sweet. That was the one thing I always remember about you. You're always sweet. You always smiled. You were always nice, even with all the other football players who were knuckleheads. That's my dad.
That's
knuckleheads.
That sounded
That's
like
the nicest way to say it.
A 50-year-old man.
It's a bunch of knuckleheads.
Word.
I appreciate that because a lot of times you're a jock,
right?
Especially being a football player, So, but for me, I've always had so many different sides, myself. I've always been like a Renaissance man. So football was the thing, but at the same time, I had
layers.
Well, and I think that's why we connected well in high school, because we both played sports, but then our friends were pretty different. Yeah. So my group of friends, they were playing, they were musicians. So do you remember Aaron Barnett?
Yeah.
Yes,
like the drum line guy.
Yes. But it's always nice. It's really cool because we have this background of playing sports for so long, going to college because of sports, and now we all have our masters, right? We all have this higher education. We're all entrepreneurs. Our lives have changed drastically.
A whole heap. A whole heap. Yeah.
Knuckleheads. A whole heap.
But I feel like that's such a positive, because if you're not able to say that in the last 10 years that your life is different, like,
where are you going?
What's happening? What have we been doing?
Right.
We just been hanging out, which you can definitely hang out. And also it's time to evolve.
Right.
So
change is coming no matter what.
Yeah. But I guess just to speak to that really quickly, you're saying that these identity changes are supposed to happen. Yeah, they seem like they are natural. At what point, or how can we equip ourselves to even, get ready for that transition? I could imagine if we had like a seminar of some sort, coaches meeting, like, this is about to be your life, after football, prepare for it, or, even get into the job market, it's just kind of like thrown in the fire every time.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if there's any kind of way to like prepare for that so that it's not such a hard hit. You know, you don't fall into these slumps of trying to figure, you know, what's going on. I don't know if you guys have seen that or
I have. Yeah.
I you know what I think? I think that it's a lot easier for any individual to go into any situation when they know what to expect. And so I think that with that question, like knowing what to do after what you identify with, for example, after football, or for us after basketball, I think that it makes it easier of a transition when we have somebody who can prepare us for it prior to us walking into it. And if we have somebody who we know we can lean on when we're like, I don't know what's going on. So mentorship,
Huge.
that can look like coaches. That can look like if you walk in faith, do you have somebody within your church, within your religious environment that you feel like you can turn to, right? Parents. We can even take it back to like when we're really young.
Yeah.
What kind of influence and what kind of impact do our parents give us? Do they prepare us financially for what adulthood looks like? Do they prepare us career-wise for what adulthood looks like? Teachers, how do they prepare us?
I agree with you. I think it's a combination of who's around us, right? Who's mentoring us, who's molding us, who's preparing us. But it also goes back to our resiliency, right? And that is a skill that you have to build onto consistently, right? And resiliency means the ability to overcome, right? The ability to bounce back, the ability to recover. And so because we know identity changes are on the way, these life circumstances are on their way, how do we build our resiliency and prepare for that? Right? And that's a loaded question.
Yeah.
That's a loaded question. Is there a right way to do it? Right? And the simple answer is no. There is no right way, right? It's the way that's best for you. And the only way that you're going to find that is by going through this journey, right? And the journey includes depression. It includes sadness. It includes anxiety. It also includes success. It includes wealth. It includes power, right? It includes all these things. And sometimes we don't have those conversations with other people telling us it's okay to do these things, right? It's okay. It's normal that you're freaking out about something like this, because I would freak out about it too. But just know that you're going to get through it because I'm here for you, right? That's one piece. That's what you were saying, right, Deanna? Having that other person, that mentor. But then it's yeah, you're right, I can, right? That's the resiliency of being able to say, yes, I can do it. I hear you, I believe you, and I believe in me too.
So just to piggyback off of that, because we talked about it earlier, you know, social media, using it as a tool.
Right.
What I think is so awesome right now about social media, aside from the things that I dislike about it, is that paradigm shift that's happening online where everyone is bigging up the next person. You know, you see nothing like quote pages are the biggest pages on Instagram right now, you know, so the conversation that's happening on the internet, it seems like more and more people are experiencing, you know, the downfall, the shortcomings, but that shift is happening to where the whole energy of the internet is like shifting in a positive manner. So, yeah, I guess you need that little pat on your back, you know, so I think it's happening right now, and you guys are pretty much, you know, leading the way, you know, participating in that whole movement, which is awesome. But yeah, I guess that's a way to prepare yourself to have that pat on the back.
That's right.
It's becoming cool to be kind.
Isn't it?
Right. Yeah.
Isn't
it? Shout out to Amanda Seals.
So talking more about depression, I want to know how you were able to say, okay, this is depression for me. How did you know?
Yeah. Honestly, I did not know. I had no clue. You know, I felt as though I was just carrying a lot on my shoulders. You know, I just felt like my plate was full. You know, because when you're depressed, when I was depressed, I felt like time, I don't know where time went. You know, I was constantly being robbed of my time, of my energy. And so I just thought I was just taking on a lot. It wasn't until, you know, being at a joyous event. We're at a football game, a Cardinals football game, my dad and I, and instead by the end of the game, like I'm like having this conversation with my dad, and I'm all, you know, spun out of control. You know, I'm having this heartfelt moment with my dad, and you know, I'm crying at this point in time, and then so that sparked a worry in him.
Yeah,
you know, he's like, I think something's going on with you, you know? So then that kind of like just led me down a rabbit hole of, you know, researching like, you know, what is wrong with me? You know, I don't feel like myself, but I'm thinking that this is like a segue. You know, I'm just transitioning. But I had realized at that point in time, my personality, who I was completely robbed, you know, so if it wasn't for my dad, you know, bringing that to my attention, you know, I don't know if I would have addressed the devil in the room, you know. And kind of like what you're talking about earlier, as far as one of 5 people, you know, dealing with some kind of mental illness, you know, whether that be ourselves, our friends or family, or even your spouses. And, you know, my wife couldn't even readily identify, you know, that what was going on with me, you know.
But she knew something was going on. She could just tell.
Yeah, she knew I was off, you know, but, shout out to Love, because I would have left me for sure. You know, during
shout
that
out
phase.
To your wife, man. She sounds awesome.
Yeah, for sure. She's a rock on that note. But yeah, it's hard to identify, but there's a trigger, and I think I came to that point, and I'm happy that I did, because we talked about it earlier. As far as, you know, some people experiencing or facing, you know, that depression or whatever phase at different points in their life.
Right.
And I just want to get it over with. Like, okay, this is it. All right, cool. Let me just do everything I can do to, you know, get over this hump, because there's so much more out there.
So what did you do?
But I think that's really good. But I want to know how if you could give it a number or like a time frame, how long do you feel like you were experiencing those symptoms prior to being like, oh, wait, this is depression?
I would say probably like a solid year, maybe close to a year, you know, because I feel like I've been out of a depressive state for almost a year now. So probably 2 to 3 years, like I was in a slump, you know, not being myself. But I think it was about a year before I had this conversation with my dad and, you know, started really diving down and trying to figure it out. So yeah, that's a long time not to know what's going on with yourself.
Right. Was it like a gradual like buildup? Like, did it start like just like one day, like I just don't really feel like myself, and then like gradually it was like today I don't feel like myself either, and today, or was it just one day it just hit you really hard?
And honestly, I can't even say like when it began, but I know you remember Deshaun.
Yeah.
You know Deshaun?
Yeah.
So
D-Mac
Deluxe.
D-Mac.
Yeah.
D-Mac Deluxe.
Deshaun McDonald.
Rest in paradise.
Yeah, rest in paradise. Easy. So that was one of my childhood friends, you know, so he knew what he wanted to do at a young age. Like he knew he wanted to be a rapper.
Right.
And actually when we were in 7th, I was in 8th grade, he was in 7th grade. We were in a rap group together.
Do you got bars?
I spit on weekends.
Hey, listen, it's Wednesday. Let's round up. Let's round up to a Saturday.
Yeah. So, you know, I always looked up to him in that regard. Like he knew what he wanted to do. And then when he ended up getting killed, that kind of like sparked a fire under me. Like, yo, I need to get on my game and, you know, start to pursue these goals and set goals first, and then pursue them, you know, because this guy been doing what he wanted to do since we were in elementary school, and here I am, you know, not knowing what I want to do. So
the comparisons.
Yeah.
Ooh, we always lose when we compare ourselves to someone else.
Yeah.
Because it's in just a little segue, I think that we all do that. I think that's such a human thing to do, is compare ourselves to the next person or to a sibling or to someone who's of the same age.
Well, and I like how your comparison led you to a realization. Right, to that aha moment.
Well, that wasn't the start of the depression. But just to your point really quickly, I was at a networking event on Monday, and this guy told me, he's like, yo, comparison is a thief of joy. I was like,
period.
It really is.
Yo, yeah.
Absolutely. Mic drop.
Yeah, for real, heavy hitter.
You compare yourself to your previous self, to your past self.
Yeah,
right.
And that's as far as it needs to go.
That's it.
Yeah,
that's it.
But that his passing is not what sparked the depression. What it did force me to do was set goals. So he knew what he wanted to do at a young age. So I was like, okay, I need to start creating myself and figuring out what it is that I want to do. And so I started setting these goals, and then my expectation of when I would accomplish these things, like how come I'm not in the Bugatti yet?
Ooh.
You know what I'm saying? Like, how come I don't have the crib in Palisades, Calabasas, whatever. So those expectations and then falling short of them, one, there were unrealistic expectations that happened in a short frame of time, but not understanding to register that in the process that this journey really is, kind of hit me over the head like, yo, you suck. Like, that was kind of the conversation I was having with, like, it's been a year and you haven't moved the needle at all. But now to look at it, like, a lot happened in that year, And
but your inner dialogue was,
my inner dialogue was like, you're not cut out for this. You're not enough. You're not prepared for this. You'll
fail.
Exactly. So having those conversations over and over again is kind of like that cloud that's just over your head all the time. And that doubt comes in and, next thing you know, you're not yourself.
Yeah. So I want to take a moment and just kind of do some visualization, because we talk about depression being a cloud, and I think a lot of people can really identify that. But when we take a moment to separate ourselves, what does depression look like for you? Like, if it was a color, would it be black? Would it be blue? Would it be red? Would it be a mixture of colors? Would it be fiery? Like, what does depression look like for you?
And you're about to make me blow my own mind right now. Because if you put a color stamp on it, I would say depression is gray.
Okay.
But the funny thing is gray is actually my favorite color.
Interesting.
I was gonna say that for me, it's a dark purple, and purple is definitely my favorite color.
Really? Okay.
I wonder what that is. There's like a weird flip of like what you love and what isn't good for you, like what you love and probably hate.
Right.
Like the flip of a coin.
I'm just glad I'm not alone.
No, you're not.
You just brought that to the light, and I just had that revelation right now. But it to me is just a grayness, and maybe because gray is such a matte color, like it's just flat and it's just consistent all the time. There's no vibrancy to it, but if you rock it right, you know what I'm saying? Like,
there you go.
For those who are listening to the podcast and cannot see him, he's definitely got on a gray dry fit hoodie at this moment.
So, but that's how it is. I mean, if to put a color on it,
what kind of shape does it have?
A shape. Dang.
Yeah.
Take a moment.
I don't know. Yeah. Geometry is not on point. Yeah. I don't know. I guess it kind of feels like maybe like an amoeba, it's just always just all over the place, ever changing. Like, you can never really get a grip on it. It's just always.
So when you were in the depression, how close was that amoeba to you?
It was on me. It was it wasn't close. It was on me. I kind of imagine, if we're going to put it in that kind of perspective of being an amoeba, it felt like what's that cartoon where he was like fighting the germs? Osmosis Jones.
Oh my gosh! Yes.
Like when he was sick.
Yes.
Like I felt like
my
headspace was so ill.
Yeah.
So, and you're talking about like the physical elements that come with depression, and during my depression, like I felt this cloudiness, like my head was so cloudy, like I had pressure behind my eyes to where I couldn't think clearly. My speech was off, like I was just like in a bad place, mentally, not just like how I felt, my energy, my personality, but like mentally I couldn't focus.
Right.
And then here I am at the same time, like I'm in marketing, so creativity is everything that I have to bring to the table. Right. And for that to just be robbed and stripped, and the only thing that saved me was that resiliency. Like, I don't care if it doesn't come to me today, tomorrow maybe, if not the next day for sure.
Well, and I like the story of you allowing yourself to be vulnerable with your dad, and for him to have that strength and the bravery to say, I'm worried. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's hard for people to even have that initial conversation and that aha moment.
Yeah. And especially, man to man, especially, black man to black man, it's kind of, it could have been a conversation of like, man up.
Right. Right.
Traditionally,
that's how the conversation goes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I think what really ties into that is it's the experience of shame, because every individual's every individual experiences shame. And for men, they internalize it in a different way, because if they have to man up, if you're not identified or seen as a man, then you're experienced as weak, as not enough. You need to grow up and act like a man, and act like nothing affects you. Act like you don't have emotions. Act like you're not a sensitive human being. And the way I think that shows up for women is if we don't have everything together, and if we look like we may need help, then it's a lot easier for us to identify with feeling shame. And if we don't feel like we have everything together, what everyone does when they feel shame or embarrassment is they tend to hide, or they don't speak light into what they are experiencing, because they feel like they're alone in that. You know what I mean? And that's literally opening the door to experiencing depression, anxiety, any of those mental illnesses. It opens the door, because if you're not able to speak your story and speak your truth, then you're the one who's having to deal with it on your own. And there's no way that you are able to be healthy and deal with all of that within your head and in that space. So I was just, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well,
go ahead, Trina.
I mean, I want to hear what you did, right? Because you spoke to your father about it. It sounds like you allowed yourself to be more vulnerable, but was there anything that you felt like you did to address the depression? Like, did you go speak to somebody professionally? Did you try changing your diet? Did you try to exercise more? What did you do?
All the above. In what order?
In that order. In that order. Mama D. Sorry, little sidebar.
So what was kind of the road to getting better is at that point in time, I felt hopeless, and growing up, I was never, one that was like forced to go to church, this is like who you are in Christ. But at that point in time, I had no idea what was going on with me, and I was desperate. So the only place I could go to was my knees. And I was fortunate enough. So I'm still in my entrepreneur journey. So there was
of your clothing line. Correct?
Yep. So the umbrella of it all is product marketing, but I do have a clothing line, Urban Nobleman. But there was 2 conferences I was supposed to go to and attend. One was like a mega marketing conference that I'm supposed to be at, but I traded that in and didn't go. I went to this other conference, small Black church in town that was hosting it, because I wanted to support. I wanted to patronize. So I'm gonna trade this in to go to the small one. So I went to this entrepreneur conference hosted by the church that I'm a part of now, my wife and I, Faith Christian Center. Super powerful conference, small, quaint. Started doing my research on them, and then went to their page and seeing like there's a man camp coming. So at that point I was like, I need something, so I got on the line, tried to register. They're like, oh, registration ended. I called back the next week. They're like, yo, we have 1 spot open.
Yes, look at God.
I was like, all right. I was like, please sign me up. Like whatever it costs, like I need to go, because I have nothing else to turn to right now. So it was a retreat, awesome experience up in Williams, Arizona.
That's where Dorina was born, and she also played college basketball there, because it then turned into
I know, right? I always end up going back home.
Just like
literally.
So it was like 300 men from all over the country, from the islands, the East Coast, down south California, up on the mountain alone with God. I'm up there, I don't know who God is. I'm just like, I hope he knows me. In the midst of like, praise and worship. And obviously at this point in time, I had a hardened heart, so I have these doubts like this might work, but let's just see.
Also might not.
I'm just here to try. And in the midst of it, this guy comes up to me. I hadn't spoke to him all man camp. I didn't know who he was. He just put his hand on my shoulder in the midst of, praise and worship. And he was like, yo, God has told me to come talk to you. And he literally told me my whole life story, from, childhood and, dealing with like abandonment issues and trust issues type things. And like spot on. He told me my whole life story. And then he's like, God just wants me to tell you that it's going to be okay. Like, you are fine. So in that moment, it was like God revealing himself to me.
Wow.
And that created hope, So I was in a depressive state already. So that hope was just like initiated right then and there. You know, but we can't fix everything through prayer, you know, but that is
beautiful.
The beginning of the resource, you know, to lean on God to get through it for sure.
But that's such a huge moment, because when you're in that depressive state, hopelessness and helplessness is so near and dear.
Yes.
So if you're able to find like just like a sparkle of hope, like that's where like I feel like the clouds separate and a little bit of that light starts to shine through. Like what a huge moment.
Well, and the spark created the burning desire.
Yeah.
Right. And you said it. I was desperate. I was desperate. I didn't know where I was going to get it from, and somebody else gave you that spark.
Yeah. Yep.
Right?
Just like that. I mean,
Man.
out of nowhere. So I was like, yo, God is super real. Like,
yeah, very much so.
I know, I know now God is real, and I still lean on him to you know, to this day, you know, day in and day out. So that was kind of like the initiation to overcoming, you know, depression and figuring out a resource, you know, to tap into. At the same time, you know, especially in our community.
So you know that. I want to talk about that. I want to talk about your quote, "One man's testimony is another man's prophecy."
Yep. And that's actually something that our pastor said up on the mountain while we were at Man Camp.
Wow.
And that's why I was giving you guys the praise as far as creating this conversation, you know, openly, and creating a platform for people to engage and participate. Because, you know, one thing that people do, and I did, and a lot of others do as well, is stay depressed and deal with it on their own. You know, but when you come out and speak about it and, you know, are just transparent, you realize that the next person is dealing either with this or something else similar to this, and you're not alone, you know. So just by coming out and, you know, sharing my testimony with you guys is a prophecy onto whoever's listening to it. You know, if this is a glimmer of hope for you, you know, there's hope out there, you know. So I stopped dealing with it on my own. You know, so I like to go around and, you know, and have no shame. And, you know, sharing my take on things, my perspectives, you know, what I would suggest, just how it is. So,
Thank you for that, Brandon.
You're really awesome.
Thank you.
And literally a natural on like any of these social media, like all of these platforms, like you're killing it. So I want to kind of shed light on like what's factual. Like, what do we know about depression? What does it look like? What are the causes? All that good stuff. If you guys want to look up this information more on your own, you can go to NAMI.org.
And that stands for the National Association of Mental Illnesses.
Yes. So causes of depression. We're going to just identify a couple. Trauma is for sure within that. Trauma is for sure within that realm of causes. Genetics. So, like, does your family experience mood disorders? Does your mom have depression? Does your grandma have depression? Does your dad? You know what I mean? So let's really, it's really important for you to be aware of the people in your immediate family. And then let's look at the second generation above, grandma, all that good stuff. Life circumstances can totally create space for depression.
Yeah. So where do you live? Is the environment you're living in safe? Or is it unsafe? Do you have to constantly worry about, you know, your children? Are you able to take care of your children? How's your financial situation? Are you suffering with addictions, right? Are you abusing any alcohol? Because alcohol is a depressant, so it will absolutely make you feel depressed.
Facts.
Yes.
Big facts.
Big facts.
And that's another major cause. If you want to look on the NAMI website, it's also identifying that about 30% of individuals with substance abuse issues have depression as well.
Yes.
30%. Like, that's extremely significant. Like, that's quite a prevalence. Also, if we have any sort of medical conditions, like we kind of mentioned earlier, if you played sports for all your life and then you come down with an injury and you can't play for 9 months, depression is like at the door. What's good? Let's hang out. If any other type of medical conditions can also invite those type of symptoms.
So I actually worked with a client who was a horseback rider, and he fell off of his horse, suffered from a traumatic brain injury, and suffered from depression from that point on. And, you know, and absolutely was from him falling off of the horse, but he actually the chemicals in his brain were unbalanced, and he needed medications to help address the depression, but the depression still was very dominant in his life. And so sometimes those medical conditions can force us to experience depression, right? Now it's something that's completely out of our control when we're talking about something medical or biological going on. Yes. So those are a lot of causes, and there's so many more causes that we could list too.
Yeah, but I think that those are some major ones. And then what it looks like is the loss of interest in doing things that you used to find pleasure in doing.
That's called apathy.
Is that what that's called?
That's called apathy.
Okay.
Yeah. Lack of pleasure, interest, satisfaction.
That's how I felt. Like today feels like yesterday and tomorrow, like automatically. So okay,
like they're bleeding into one another.
Yeah, it's just like
that's disorientation. One long day. When you're disoriented, that means you don't really know what day it is, what time of day it is.
Well, no, not like that, but saying like, I know like yesterday I felt like crap. Today I feel like crap. And I know tomorrow I'm going to feel like crap. You know what I'm saying? Like every day felt the same. You know, there was no ups and downs, no thrills.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right. Some of the other symptoms that you'll notice in terms of your behavior, sleep disturbances that Dorina had mentioned earlier. Are we sleeping a whole lot? Are we not sleeping at all? Where are we at with that scale?
Right.
You usually want to get about every night 6 to 8 hours of sleep. That's like the recommended amount.
Yes. Any appetite disturbances too. Some of us are emotional eaters. I know I am. Whenever I'm feeling depressed, stressed out, I go to my ice cream all the time. Give me the pizza, all my chocolates,
give me the cheese, give me the dairy.
I want all of it because it makes me feel happy. I eat those foods when I'm happy, and I notice I eat it when I'm emotionally overwhelmed or I'm in a depressive state. So if you're having any weight changes, that's absolutely a criteria for depression. Yeah. And another one that's a little bit more unsafe. We want to talk about the things that depression can lead to in terms of safety issues. So self-injurious behaviors, suicidal thoughts, any preoccupation with death or focusing on death, right? Even having thoughts that life would be better off if I wasn't here. Those don't have to be specific to suicide, but thinking about you not existing in this world, that's preoccupation with death, and that's absolutely associated with depression.
Yeah. So if you identify or you resonate with any of these, what do we do? What kind of treatments are out there? Psychotherapy.
Yes.
Totally one that I would highly encourage. Go see a professional if you feel like you need it. Yeah. I've seen a professional. Everyone has seen a professional. Not everyone, but everyone should. Even if you don't feel like you're in the depth of those slumps, if you know that you need some help and you need some support or an outlet, go and do it. Go and do it.
Yeah. And if you don't know how to do it, ask us. Ask us. Yeah. We will help you get connected. That's why we created Empower el Mundo. We want to empower the world. We want to show you that there is another side to mental health. It's called mental wellness, right? And we all have this journey through La Vida Loca. She's a part of the journey too, right? So when I asked Brandon to separate depression and imagine what it looks like, it's because they're involved in this journey. Depression, anxiety, pain, trauma, they're a part of La Vida Loca. They're a part of our vida, right? Our lives.
Yes.
And so we want to make sure that we're building resilience. We want to make sure that we're preparing ourselves. We're becoming more mentally tough and being able to overcome all the obstacles that are a part of La Vida Loca.
Yes.
Yes.
Other forms of treatment, depending on the intensity of your depression, is medication. Some individuals can benefit from taking antidepressants, mood stabilizers, also antipsychotic medications. Yeah. Again, dependent on the level of depression that you are experiencing, medication is going to be prescribed by a professional. If it is not prescribed by a professional, do not take it.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
I also am aware that someone on this podcast does not necessarily like medications. So I just want to give the opportunity to challenge that.
Well, yeah, for me, definitely not a fan of pharmaceuticals. Try to lean on that as a treatment as well. But hearing you guys' take on it and how it does benefit some people, I guess, I'm open to it, but every case is different.
Okay.
So I know I tested it out after going to therapy, dealing with antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds and ADHD meds and all that. I think when I first entered into a depressive state, it was that mild depressive being that I was in. And then as I started to use these pharmaceuticals, I feel like that's when I really, went down a slump.
Yeah.
And I think just because using those, it really changed my chemicals. Like the chemicals in my bodies were just like way out of balance. So yeah, they would come in spurts. I'll take a pill, like, okay, I'm happy now. But then, the come down is 10 times worse for me.
Right.
Right. So if I had to, advocate, when I'm testifying, telling my testimony onto others, now I speak to do what you have control of, as far as, your diet, your exercise, what are you feeding into your mind, yes. Your circle, starting with those things first and not relying on medication. Medication might be a little cherry on top, but if you don't address all those other things, you're just masking it even further.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So that's my only qualm with the pharmaceuticals, because there are so many natural resources that are out there that we could turn to and that we have control of, that we could do right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So
there's dependence and independence, and then codependence, right? Mm-hmm. We want to learn how to be independent and rely on ourselves, but we also sometimes have to depend on things outside of our control, like medications. Yeah. And so there's a nice delicate balance with it. But with that being said, we hope that you guys learned a lot about depression today. Yes. There's so much more that we could talk about too, honestly.
Yeah. And we want to leave you guys, well, actually, we have a couple of questions from the audience that I think it would be worth us checking in about. Listen, this has been a longer podcast than usual, but I feel like this is such a great topic. If we need to, we can make a part 1 and part 2. We'll see how it goes. All right, so, hey, the angle thing for me is a little off, but okay, so for those of you who do not follow us on our social medias yet, make sure to do that, because we take various polls on our topic that we are going to talk about on our podcast. So this week, the topic, of course, is depression, as we've been discussing for the past 50 minutes. And one of our viewers asked this amazing question. Can you feel happy and depressed at the same time?
Right.
When you first asked that earlier when we went live and my mind was blown, I feel like you just blew my mind again. Like the whole concept is like, it's deep, but yeah, I mean, for me, I've seen it actually. I've actually, now you bring it into words, I've seen it for other people. For me, not so much. But I mean, it's an interesting space to be in. I think that's, a hopeful space to be in.
Yes.
Even if we're dealing with these depressive things, if there's ever that glimmer of hope, whether it's days or moments or, instances, I think that's awesome. For me, definitely didn't experience that, that gray was, like I said, today feels like yesterday and tomorrow, so the thrill was gone. Things that I enjoyed were just non-existent. The only thing I could focus on was something's off about me, so hats off to those people that have gone through that, and have seen, phases of that hope. For me, the hope didn't come until a moment,
right? Mm-hmm. Until it was like the road to recovery at that point. It sounds like.
Yep.
I think that I think that certain individuals definitely have a much more difficult time finding happiness when they're in that depressive state. I also think that you can experience moments of happiness and joy when you are overall feeling depressed. I think that sometimes what that can look like is just like a moment of okayness, mm-hmm. and moment of like gratitude. Maybe you just find a moment and like you see your person, whoever that person is, if it's your partner, your spouse, your best friend, your coworker, your boss, whoever that individual is, if you just see them and for that moment you feel okay, I think that can be experienced as joy and happiness. And then the breath after that, we can go back into that depressive state and have that inner dialogue of like, this sucks, life is trash, blase, blase. That's what I think. I think that it depends on the individual. And if you're going through your life and you're kind of going through the motions, like if you're going to work, but you're not like genuinely engaged, then I think that that's also something to take account of. Mm-hmm. If you're just going through the motions, no emotion attached to it, but you can laugh, like that's also can be experienced as depression, symptoms of depression and also moments of hope and moments of joy.
Yeah, no, I agree with the two of you. I mean, as you guys are talking about it, I get this visualization in my head of, have you guys ever done the camp runs where you have to like tie your legs with somebody else and run together at the same time?
Like the three-legged race?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I did that at work.
Right?
It was so fun.
So I envision, two people, one of them is depression, the other one is happiness, right? And when we're resilient and there's a balance in our life, there's that harmony. Right, they're able to run together and kind of work together because we talk about balance. It's really, you can't have one without the other, right? But when depression is dominating, it's like they're the only one running and happiness is kind of being dragged, right? And then vice versa, kind of like how you mentioned, Deanna, there's kind of those moments of happiness. So again, we have that balance, but then happiness is taking the lead, right? And so it's kind of like this race throughout our life.
I like that.
That's good. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And actually, what you said earlier too, some people could be depressed and have happy moments, and then some people could be happy and have depressed moments. And
Totes.
Definitely at this point in my journey, I feel like I'm breaking out of a depressive state, but I still have bad days. We all
do.
Like we're human at the end of the day.
And I think that's like super important to overstand.
Yes.
Not understand, but just like overstand. Like it was just a bad day.
Yes.
Like I'm not gonna let this daisy chain into another bad day or a bad moment. But that's just that inner dialogue, having that conversation with yourself, like, okay, bad day, you know what I'm saying? Write it off as a loss, and then use those good days, as momentum. Like, yesterday, I ended the day good, force myself, like today, I'm going to wake up in a good mood, I don't know what's going to happen the rest of the day, but not letting those moments and instances, really just ball and chain you.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Let's answer one more question, and then we'll get on to our skills, and then we will wrap up thy podcast. Culturally, within the American culture and also like subcultures, if you identify with the African American community, the Hispanic community, the white community, white culture, whoever you identify with, people tend to be taught that it is not okay to feel overly stressed out or feel depression. So if you're within that type of stigma, how do you change it? How do you overcome that?
You need to find a different group of people to be surrounded by. That's what I would suggest.
But if we're talking about a culture,
you need to find some different people to be around, because this is what I'll say. Even within a culture, there are subcultures, right? So in in Black culture, be a man. Well, actually, in all American culture, be a man.
In the man culture.
Yeah,
in the man culture, literally.
Be a man. Yeah. And if you talk about Hispanic culture, it's machismo, right? Mm-hmm. I am the man. I do everything, right? I take care of everything. So, if you're surrounded by people who have this type of belief or have these types of attitudes or values, then it's going to be really hard to feel connected. You will feel alone, right? And so when we learn that we're not alone, when we begin that pursuit of happiness, right? The pursuit of awareness, the pursuit of myself, that's when we are able to open the doors and allow other people who are like us to step into our lives, right? But we also have to be the ones that are willing to open those doors.
Yeah.
And so culture gets a little bit tricky, but there are subcultures within cultures too. You just got to look for them.
Yeah. And I think it's important also to, if you are feeling under the pressure of, whatever culture, stigma, that you have, is to break away from that and create who you want to be.
Right.
Like one of Tony Robbins' favorite things I ever seen him say in life was like, he just stood up on stage like, I created this motherfucker standing right here. Oh, I can't say that.
Yes.
My bad.
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but that's what he said.
But, he just like, I created who I want to be, I didn't let those outside influences, people tell me who I needed to be, who I wanted to be. And I think you just have to let that resonate with you and, really latch on to that doesn't matter what culture I'm in. I'm an individual first.
That's right.
And I'm going to be who I need to be.
That gets tricky with the collectivist cultures, right? So the cultures that don't believe in individual anything. But anywho, I love that.
Really great perspectives. Okay, what we would like to do is leave you all with a tip. One thing that you can do. Well, really, we're going to leave you with 3 because we're all going to identify one skill that we think is valuable to implement into your routine. And this can be if you're in the slumps of depression, or if you're just kind of like tiptoeing in it, or if you feel okay today, even if you're not in that moment. Because the best way that you can take care of yourself in that moment is to be proactive and take care of yourself when you feel good.
Yes.
So one tip that I would like to provide, and it's something that I practiced a lot when I was within the therapeutic and counseling world, and I do this in my own world today. It's mindfulness. This is the way that I would teach it and I would talk about it. It's a DBT skill, which is dialectical behavior therapy. And what it does is it allows you to experience validation and acceptance in its full, right? So with mindfulness, what I would like to encourage you all to try, if you haven't done yet, is meditate. Meditate. People hear that and they're like, oh, I don't know what that is. I don't want to sit down with my thoughts. If you're not ready to sit down with your thoughts in full silence, then I would encourage listening to a guided imagery script. You can find that on YouTube. You can find that on various Calm apps, on the Calm app, and on various other apps that allow you to sit with yourself. But what that does is it allows you to experience that moment mentally without judgment and physically without pressure, right?
Love those.
That's good. That's really
Love
good.
those.
Yeah. My turn?
Yeah, your turn.
Yeah. Yeah. Meditation is huge. Like, just to piggyback on that and, coupling that with prayer, so one of the greatest things I ever heard was like, prayer is you talking to God. Meditation is allowing God to talk to you, because you're just emptying your mind, your thoughts, and just like, you don't understand how hard it is to think about nothing sometimes,
Right.
But it's super powerful, especially if you on this journey of entrepreneurship and all the time our minds are going to thinking and strategizing. You have to give yourself that chance to just empty yourself. My strategy is, or my skill that I would suggest is to understand that mental health is actually a physical health issue at the same time. So it's just not like, oh, my mind is, out of whack. No, your whole body is out of whack.
Right.
Right. So, one of the things that, I still practice all the time is, like really just focusing on gut health, so I go through fast, every quarter I'll fast 30 days and, cut, sugars out of my diet, cut breads, cut meats out, just to give my body a chance to reset, because when you have that bad gut, all those chemicals that connect to your brain are just way out of whack. So you got to give yourself a chance to like hit the reset button. So
Totally.
Gut health is huge. I'm pretty sure I'm the only yogi with dreads at my studio, so have definitely tapped into yoga, and that's kind of like part of the meditation as well. And it was kind of weird, like going into yoga, ex-football player, brute jock or whatever, and going to a class with majority women, and they're beasting and I'm dying.
Literally, it's harder than it looks.
Yeah, it is.
But it's so freeing, and I think you posted on it like plenty of times, but really focusing on what breath is.
Yes.
Like that gives you a chance to like
Yes.
tune into your breath, and I think that's to
I just took a deep one.
because it's an automatic system, so we don't think about breathing,
Right.
And then
Right.
but you don't really notice what the lack of oxygen in your body has, the effect that it has on you. So taking that time, I would say focus on gut health, and make sure that you do your physical activities. For me, it's yoga. Work out and lift, occasionally, but I don't miss yoga.
That's
Right.
awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it. I love that.
Yes. Oh, okay. So my skill is from cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's more focused on your internal dialogue because, like you mentioned, when we're in the depression, we start to beat ourselves up. We have a lot of self-defeating thoughts. We tell ourselves we can't do it. You're not good enough. Even if you get there, you're not going to be happy. It won't be enough for you. You should be ashamed. So what I want you to do is practice the 3 C's, right? As in the letter C for Charlie. 3 C's. It stands for catch it, check it, change it, right? And it's specific to your thoughts. So you catch the negative thought, And you have to sit down and really focus on this. So spend about 10 to 15 minutes practicing this. You catch the negative thought and you write it down. Okay. Then you check the negative thought with facts. So you ask yourself questions like, is this true? And if it is true, what makes it true objectively, right? So it's all based in facts. It's not based in how you feel, right? So if my negative thought is I'm a failure, then I'm going to check it by saying, is it true? Well, what makes it true? Well, I failed the test, so it makes me feel like a failure. Okay, well, what makes it false, right? So we have to play the devil's advocate. What can make it false? Well, I graduated, right? I put myself in a position where not many other people can place themselves to be successful. And I have a second chance, right? I can continue to pursue my dreams even if I failed, right? I always have another opportunity. Are these facts? Yes, right? And then we get to a place where we change it. So after we catch the negative thought, we check it with facts, and then we change it into something more realistic. So am I a failure? No, I failed the test, but I still have these abilities and I still have the opportunity to be successful.
I love it.
That's big time.
Yeah.
That's big time.
Big time.
Yeah.
We
It's
like that.
like a conscientious thing. Like you have to think and force yourself to go
Yes.
through that process.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
taking that initiative says a lot about, who you are,
Right.
that you care, because not a lot of people like,
Yeah.
okay, I feel this
Right.
way.
That's mental toughness. Depression is waiting. Depression, pain, trauma, anxiety, they are always waiting. They are always just waiting for that opportunity to come in and hit you with la vida loca, right? The
Always knocking at the door.
the unexpected, always there.
We're not trying to let them
We
in.
didn't even talk about anxiety.
Nah, that's a
a
different
whole-
episode.
Oh my
And with that
goodness.
being said,
Man,
we will bring that up
Yes.
on another podcast
Thanks
because
for
I think
bringing
that's
that up.
definitely a great conversation. So
it'll be really
we're
good.
glad that you guys listened to this. We know that it was a little bit longer than usual. And like I mentioned, we'll play around with the idea of making a part 1 and part 2 episode. So we definitely want to thank you, Brandon Williams.
much, Brandon.
Thank you guys.
Let's plug you one more time. Where can the people find you?
Yep. So you can find me online, all the social media platforms at Mr. Be Your Brand. That's Mr.B.No.E.Your.Brand. And you'll check out, some of my clothing, my clothing store, Urban Nobleman, on there, which really just speaks to the kings within inside of us that we've been since the beginning of time, and for us to really, stay connected to that in this modern day. And then, always up for what else is coming down the pipeline. So
That's right.
Thank you guys.
Amazing.
It's
That's
awesome.
right.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank
And
you.
we also
again,
want to give a
Brandon.
special shout out to @Sweet Culture. He is the
Thank you.
man behind this amazing production.
No, he
Yes.
is the man.
The man.
Yeah.
Shout
Like,
out.
is taking our game to the next level.
Honestly.
You can find him also on Instagram and Facebook @Sweet Culture. If you need somebody who can provide photography, videography, audiography. I'm not sure if that's a word, but it
Yes.
felt
Ooh.
okay.
I don't know the word.
But definitely reach out to him, schedule him, book that. Like, you will not be disappointed. And thank you guys for being here with
Thank you
us.
so much.
No, this is so special. This is great.
This is. So with that being said, I'm Dorina,
I'm Deanna.
and be empowered.
Live empowered. Remember to subscribe our channel, Empower Up, on all streaming platforms. Podcast.
Let's go. Ooh. Yes.
Uh-huh.
You gotta be empowered.
You gotta
To
live
live
empowered.